Hello, my name is Jacob, and I'm a Norse Pagan, and welcome back to Know Your Folk. I know it's been a long time since we actually did this series where I interview members of the community, usually content creators or craftsmen, that add their name to the Norse Pagan community. So today I have Jason, also known as Wandering Yggdrasil, and someone that has written books for the community before, or at least a book, working on more books. But in case someone doesn't know who you are, Jason, can you give us a rundown of your background into paganism and kind of what you've been up to?
Sure. So Jason Ralls is my name, and I am a Norse Pagan as well, Heathen, however you want to call it. I follow the old ways and the old gods, and my way of, because when I got into this faith, I didn't want to just participate, I wanted to also contribute. So my way of contributing is to take and create poetry. And it began on Instagram and rolled into the creation of one book which I've already released, and now I'm working on the second, which will be out soon, and I just kind of perform my faith and practices and create my art and share with the community and try to build a community around that.
So to kind of roll into the book and again introducing you to people that may not know who you are, what is the idea and the title and the general information on the first book that you've written?
So the current book is called The Oath, a Heathen Poet's Journey, and it captures basically the first few months of my re-entry onto the Norse path, because you know, I've had many different religious experiences and explorations over the years, but when I came back to this at the beginning of 2020 and really committed to it, and then the poetry came along with it, I sort of began sort of a shamanic, almost shamanic process. So a lot of my poetry, certainly the books, are shamanic in nature, where I enter a sort of non-ordinary reality, relaxed trance state, and just the poetry itself is like, it's almost like a long-term journey. So, you know, you might put some drumming on and go on a shamanic journey of like 20 or 30 minutes and have some experiences. For me, it's 3 to 4 months of writing these books. And what it is it actually started in the summer of 2020. I had this poem where I saw Idun, so the goddess of youth, immortality, who provides the apples that allows all the gods to stay young. And something about it sparked something in me where I was like, okay, I need to follow her. So then just what followed was a series of narrative poems where I follow her into the underworld, through various challenges, and you know, some other gods and goddesses show up along the way, and it eventually leads me to, which is the title of it, The Oath. So my oath, spoiler since it's been out for a while, my oath to Odin is within the book itself. And so now what I have is a book that captures my journey in the faith and my relationship with Odin beginning, and has my oath in it, so that, and also the bind rune on the cover is very related to my binding to Odin. So it's been a very interesting experience, because now I have this distinct entity that feels like it's more been created through me than me making it. And now every time somebody buys a copy, my oath to Odin is printed out in the world. The bind rune that binds me to Odin is put on the cover and it's shipped out to someone. It's just a really special way for me to work my art and my faith together.
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of connected us when we first started talking, which I mean, I don't even remember now. I think it's been over a year now.
Been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think one of the things that connects us is the fact that you wrote this book without a publisher. You know, I created this YouTube and just kind of started going forward, recording my journey, and this book for you is kind of very similar to that. So, I mean, because you use, what was it, Amazon publication?
KDP, yep.
Yeah, so how's it been that process of like, you know, you are the guy, you know, throughout this whole process? How's that been?
It's really freeing, and it's, maybe poetry is an easier medium to deal with, but I've really enjoyed the process, and it's something, you know, that's set in the back of my mind for many years, is looking out at the landscape of publishing and art creation, and knowing that, you know, I like to say the gatekeepers are dead. There's no one to stop you from creating your vision and sharing it with the world, and especially something like, you know, Northern tradition paganism. It's a small niche. You know, if you go to a large publication industry, even Llewellyn, or somebody like that in the pagan community, it's hard to, you really got to get some kind of buy-in for them to do that. But you can just, you know, if you have a vision, you can create something and make it, and you know, if it only finds a few small people, because you cut out all the middlemen, you can still do it feasibly without, like, you know, losing a bunch of money. And it's been really good to have control, and I think the main key for doing something like this is that you can't, it's also really easy to just take anything, throw it on paper, and put it up in your published author. So you have to have measured steps and processes in place to make sure that you're creating something that's worthwhile. You know, so for example, I have a editor who I send my books to, and she edits them, and she's also Norse Pagan, so that helps. I have my cover artist at Alchemist of the Arts on Instagram. She creates these beautiful bind rooms, so she actually takes the rough drafts and works out some art that matches the story. And what I end up at the end of the day is a finished product that I'm proud of and I can release. And it's just it's a really good experience to be in control of all that.
So moving into questions from the community, I actually put up a poll and just like a little questionnaire on Instagram to see if anyone wanted to know anything directly about you. I kind of like filtered down the questions into the most asked questions, and a lot of it was about your personal practices. So do you want to dive a little bit into what it is to be a pagan as you are a heathen, like in the daily life, kind of what you do?
Right, so it is, I guess to talk about my personal practices, it's very much probably similar to other people. So I have gods and goddesses that I relate to, and as I go through my days, I think probably the most connected thing is the offering. So I like to either light a candle or incense, or I have an outdoor altar where I like to go and speak to the gods and goddesses and pour something in the ground or leave some fruit. And I feel like the gift exchange is probably the center piece of my practice, because I think a lot of people within paganism, it's, you're not really sure how to do it at first, and it's very, what do I do? And a lot of people don't really know how to move. But for me, the act of going to the deities and giving them a gift, and then you find that you get things in return, is really important. So the centerpiece is the gift giving, so the gift exchange. And then from that, everything kind of revolves around what I'm going through in my life, and this sort of relates to my writing as well. Basically, what my writing is I have some struggles or some trouble or some problem or some issues that I'm going through, and I sit down and I write through that, or I leave an offering to the gods and I speak through that, and that kind of creates this relationship that works into my practice. But it's like everybody else's. I give offerings, I read books, I learn, I try to emulate the deities that I'm working with. If I'm interacting with Scotty, obviously Scotty and Uller, have been maybe on a lot of people's minds since most of the continental U.S. was gripped in thick ice and snow. So certainly working with them, going out barefoot in snow, that kind of thing, and just an ever-evolving practice. And one thing I think maybe to finish with as far as my personal practice is, lately I've been doing more activities with Odin, getting more in contact with Odin. And one thing that I've been doing is not just reading up on Norse literature. So, if Norse Paganism is the religion of homework, where you have to study and read, and everybody has a copy of the Eddas or the Saga of Volsungs, I've been feeling Odin pushing me to branch out further into different avenues of knowledge, because there's a lot to know about the world. From the late Cretaceous dinosaurs and their paleoecology to the price dynamics in the stock market, to the long flow of time as animals were shaped from single-cell organisms to multicellular organisms that can recognize themselves in time, to the intellectual capacities of cephalopods and cuttlefish and other non-human organisms. So yeah, that's me following the Odin path, is trying to work that into my life so that it's less artificial in terms of, hey, here's a god and goddess I want to talk to, and hey, here's what this book says, more of a ongoing relationship.
No, I think that's really interesting, because I actually been exploring that a little bit more myself. Like, right when you came in here, I was showing you like the book haul we had the other day, and I got like Celtic paganism books. I've been trying to find more into Slavic paganism to kind of influence what I know, and it's same thing with like science and history and space. I find that while we may not have any direct sources into Norse mythology and the Norse faith, when we learn about other things, they influence and inform our practice more than take away from it. And I think that's one of the really cool things about it, is you actually learn more the more you branch out. So to pull it more back into the writing aspect of this, something I was a little curious about is, one of the problems I have as a YouTuber is I want to record everything that happens. Right. Do you find that you want to write down everything that happens?
Yes, and it's difficult too, because I follow Odin. In the Havamal, it says, basically, keep your mouth shut. But I'm a writer. I never want to keep my mouth shut. I want to tell everybody everything about me all the time. and I have a little device that I carry on my pocket that allows me to do that. So it's a real give and take. You know, a lot of my poetry that I put, you know, daily, every other day on Instagram is related to those small moments that happen on a daily basis. But yeah, it's definitely a struggle to balance how to share your life and your faith and be a creator, but also keep that personal side. You know, there's definitely some things that I keep more private, and I think you should, and I try to be respectful also of the gods and goddesses that I interact with, because, you know, it's tempting to take a picture of every offering I make and put it up on social media, but that, you know, seems to defeat the purpose. So, you know, I think it's important to keep some things private.
I don't know, you shared your entire Oath to Odin in a book. I don't know if you have any privacy left.
That's true, and there's probably a copy being printed off right now, so that's exciting.
That is really exciting. So pull it back into community questions. Another commonly asked question was, what are your influences as far as like the Norse side of things? Is there any, I mean, obviously you have Poetic Eddas and things like that, but I mean, skalds are very prevalent in the pre-Christian Scandinavian times. Do you have anything from the past that influences you now?
I think probably the biggest influences from the past are poets like Hesiod, Pindar, Homer, because actually as a young child I read a lot of the classical Greek poets, and, you know, Ovid and the like, and you read, especially the Iliad is a great book. The Odyssey drags on a bit and is a little mopey for my taste. It was more, you know, popular from the Romantic period forward, but everything before that was Iliad. You know, Alexander the Great slept with it under his pillow. So those kinds of stories where those Greek poets would tell the stories of the gods, that always spoke to me, and I always thought that would be an interesting thing to do. In terms of the, you know, Eddic poets, so I think certainly the Eddic and Skaldic poetry inspires me in spirit, but actually not knowing Old Norse, I don't really have a direct line into, you know, the Eddic and the Skaldic forms. That is something I would like to look into as I move forward. But right now it's mostly, in terms of inspiration, it's just the idea of all these people that used to exist in all these pre-Christian religions that were carried on through spoken and sung word, through verse, and that's what I always feel connected to, and the thing that really ties me to this is that, you know, before the written word, before Christianity, before anything even slightly modern, there were men and women gathered around fires, taking the struggles of life, daily life and existence, and singing songs and speaking words about these ancient, powerful forces and how they can speak to that experience. So that's kind of the spirit of that, really, is where I draw my inspiration, I'd say.
So I think a lot of people wanted to know, are you influenced any by the modern music movements such as Wardruna, Heilung, Skald? Like, did any more of the musical side of the poetry influence you? Or maybe the better question is, are you going to sing one day?
I don't know if you want to hear me sing, but it's interesting because this current research, which you've done a video about it, the resurgence in like folk music and northern tradition music, and how that's kind of influenced the modern renaissance of this faith. I was only vaguely familiar with it. Obviously, as I got more into it over the past year or two, there's Heilung and there's Wardruna, and I'm listening to them, and there's a really good experiences I have. You know, I would caution against listening to Norupo on loop while you drive around, because weird stuff starts to happen, and you're like, was that a bird or a sign? It was.
Gotta go find it.
But interesting, I was on the Nordic Mythology podcast when I released my first book, and talking to them, Matthias and Dan, about it, and they actually brought up Einar Selvik's process, which actually apparently is very similar to mine, where he goes out in the forest, and I've since watched this short video, which you should look at on YouTube, it's very cool, on hunting songs, and the concept of going out and hunting songs. And that's actually something I've enveloped in my process, so I'm going out and I'm hunting these poems, and I'm hunting, you know, I'm going out in this liminal space or in this non-traditional reality within my mind, if I'm visualizing, and I'm trying to hunt something down that I can bring into reality. But yeah, again, that's something that the modern practitioners who are doing this is something I want to study more as I move forward on this path.
So one of the little known facts that OG Wisdom of Odin followers would know is that I actually wrote poetry in the very beginning of the Wisdom of Odin's inception in Instagram. I haven't done it in quite some time. And quite frankly, I stopped doing poetry videos and things like that because it's not that popular. They're some of my least performing videos, but I enjoy doing them. And one of the questions, or really a discussion I wanted to have with you, is the fact that poetry plays such an important role in our past. And it really seems to be, like you said, like around the fire, poetry was shared, or even up to the point it was recorded. And yet today, it seems like it's losing prominence quite a bit, which is why I'm really excited you are writing poetry books, because it seems like that's something we're losing. Is that something you've kind of noticed as well?
That certainly was the case. Although I feel like with the advent of social media, and Insta poetry is a thing. You know, Instagram actually, for all of its trouble and some supposed evils, Instagram's been largely responsible for a resurgence of poetry in the modern world, I think, because there's a lot of people who are famous on Instagram for writing poetry, and they're selling, you know, hundreds of thousands of copies, and it seems to have brought that back into the forefront. And I think it's just natural. It's just something, you know, and probably I'm biased, but there's just something about the power of language, and just poetry in general, and I think, you know, our ancestors were constrained by certain forms, but with, you know, maybe the 18th to the 20th century and the breaking free from rhythm and pattern and free verse and just a multitudinous ways to explore the page, I think that gives us kind of a ripe opportunity to do this work. And it's been very strange for me creating this poetry, because I find it's a very strange thing to create a work of art, and to share it in the world and have people go through this work and read your words and have such kinds of, you know, religious experiences that you had while writing. And I found it's just, I feel like we're entering an age where that's going to be very useful. And certainly I'm going to keep writing, you know, many poetry books, and I don't see the well going dry on both the struggles that we face as humans and the power of language to inform that, and the relationships with the gods and goddesses to overlay that. So I think bringing those three together in poetry and song and art, and, you know, people that make mead horns with runes carved into them and people that make shields, I feel like all of this is kind of a different branches of the same tree that's, I think, going to do very well as we move forward.
So moving a little bit into the Poetic Edda, we did have a few questions from the community that they kind of want to know your opinion on it. So as far as like the Poetic Edda itself, one, is it something you read fairly often for inspiration, or is it, you know, kind of that one and done thing, or, you know, twice, you know, you feel like you've gotten as much as you can out of it?
Definitely, the prose Edda, I need to get over my issues with and read more thoroughly.
You're not the only one.
Because there's wisdom to be had there, and also the sagas. But the Poetic Edda, I think, has a lot of, the Elder Edda, or, you know, if you're European, just Edda, has a lot to give. And I think there's certainly passages that I revisit. I think the Havamal has obviously got a lot of meat to it, and there's a lot of things you can explore. The Voluspa is just wonderful, and I could probably read that every day. But yeah, I definitely think it's more than a one and done with those. But I also try not to, I feel like there's two traps. One trap is to say, oh, it's just garbage influenced by Christianity, read it once and that's fine. And the other trap is to say, oh, it's the holy lore, and it is inviolable, and it's perfect, and it was passed from the hand to mouth of God straight to, oh wait, no wait, that's a different religion. So I think I try to tread the line between the two.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to be in, because I mean, I feel very similar to it. You know, I've read the Poetic Edda, you know, back to front a few times, but it's not something that I keep by my bedside. I read every night, and I'm like, what has the Lord hath taught me today? But at the same time, I do think it's a good thing to go back to, and like you said, the Havamal, I think if you read that, every time you're going to get something new out of it. And of course, the Voluspa is actually just a good read. But then there's certain ones, you know, I can't even name one, but they have like, it's the ones with the really weird names that you can't remember, and it's like, this is just garbage. I mean, we have to accept the fact there are some poems in there that are just not that good.
Yeah, like Heimdall as Rig setting up the social classes. Like, it's interesting from a political anthropology standpoint, but it's not something I'm going to sit down and read on a daily basis.
Right, yeah, you don't find people talking about that one very often.
So one question people wanted to ask you as well is, how do you interpret the stories as far as like the mythos? Do you take them more literally or more metaphorically?
Yes.
Yes, both.
That's invariably my answer. My very complicated, trite answer to, are the stories true? Yes. And are the gods real or metaphors? Yes. Because I think we live in this world of reality and facts, and certainly science has won the day for now. And, you know, where everything has to be backed up by logic, and you know, it's useful to a point. For me, the stories, all ancient stories that have been strong enough to last through time, contain truth with a capital T, and are worth experiencing. At the same time, you know, I don't think that literally the world is Ymir, broken up. However, there's so much truth in those stories that it is true, even if it isn't. And again, it's very hard to express, especially the way I relate to language and the way I relate to stories. But you know, in my mind, there's reality, which is, you know, this chair I'm sitting on, this water that I'm drinking, and then there's non-ordinary reality, which is, you know, if you deal with anything shamanic, you know, non-ordinary reality, it may be a recent past 50 years term coined by people studying shamanism, but it's that, you know, for example, you sit here, you close your eyes, and if you're driving, don't do this, but close your eyes and picture a field. Now see trees in that field. Now see a light in the trees. Now see an animal approach. Now ask yourself, what was this animal that you saw? And probably everyone saw a different animal. Maybe I saw an eagle. Maybe you saw a boar.
It was a turkey.
It was a turkey. Nice. Well, what you just did was a shamanic exercise in visualization, and you just looked into, or through a small window, into non-ordinary reality, which is what overlays reality. It's where things happen before they happen. It's where things are always happening, that have happened and will happen. Where time is funny, and where you can meet yourself, your true self, and learn some things, and where I think all the myths that have always happened have happened and will happen and are happening continuously, where Ragnarok is happening, I think, where Balder is laughing as a young man, where he's laying dead on the funeral pyre, where he is feasting in the Hall of Hell. Like, again, that's just my own pet theory on how to relate to the truth of these stories, is that once you get up above the bedrock of reality into this non-ordinary reality where stories move and where myths moves and where the heart is more important than the head, I think the deeper you go into that space, especially if you have something you're struggling with on an emotional level, the deeper you go into that space, the more true it is, and the less important it is how actually factual it is.
Yeah, like a book I picked up the other day and was beginning to read was talking about the left and right brain, you know, ideal is that, you know, you have to live in balance of the both. You know, you can't live completely right brain because then you're living in a fantasy, but you can't also live purely left brain because then you don't have any true belief. You know, you don't believe in anything, you just know things. And so faith is when you combine the two and are able to live with the two in perfect balance. And I think that fits really well with paganism because, you know, yes, we talk to invisible beings, but at the same time, there's a reason we do, and it's because we can actually quantify experiences and we can actually say that it fits in with the natural world around us. So moving out of that a little bit and moving, because we can go onto that conversation all day, and you're like, but then we're going to need something better than water. We're going to need some bourbon, some cigars in here. But to start closing out this interview, I do want to ask you about future work and see where your work is heading moving forward. So can you talk a little bit about anything you're working on currently?
Sure. My second book was just released to the editor, and she returned it back to me today. So this is good timing. My cover artist is working on the art, so I would expect to be making an announcement about that soon. I will say, this will be the first place I've said it, the title at the moment is The Chaos Path, A Heathen Poet Seeks His Heart. And it's a very much of a labyrinthine journey through, you know, if the first book was me stepping onto the path and making an oath, the second book is, well, what do I do now? And, oh, I'm a huge fraud. And poetry, that's silly, you know. It's almost like the
imposter syndrome kind of thing. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. This book is kind of my antidote to the imposter syndrome. It's myself going through some journey and giving myself permission to be who I am, so to speak.
So I was going to ask. I did put this in the questions yesterday. Can you read anything you got so far? Like, can you give us a little bit? Actually,
can, because so I have a Patreon, and what I did was, because in the end phases of writing a book, it's almost impossible to create anything else from a patron, who I appreciate. So I took the first poem of the book in rough draft form and put it on my Patreon. So I could definitely read that, and I'd be happy to do that. Read that, and this is how the book starts, and we'll go from there. The tree. Dark crags, moss-grown cliffs, gulls in flight, their cries lost in the roar of falling rivers. My hands reaching, my face wet from the spray, my heart a shaman's drum. I climb the jagged trunk of the tree at the heart of my universe. Yggdrasil. She sinks her roots in eternity's womb, branches brush the stars. Why do I climb the great tree? I do not remember starting. Only here I am, spirit straining, soul climbing the eagle path. Shadows curl, dark whorls in wood like stone. They mimic my darkness. Thirst assaults me, a desert of ignorance. I climb to escape my own brokenness, but it haunts me. Fallen hero in a desecrated grave. A fly lands on my shoulder, shimmering, ugly. His bite stops my tears, drives me up wooden cliffs. I curse and thank Loki, that god of chaos who knows when to comfort and when to bite. He is wise to my self-deceit. I carry my will and my spirit up, through cloud and mist and sunlight, through bands of night filled with stars, up the long passage. Midgard fades. The light is brighter now, sharp as broken glass, beautiful, austere. The horizon tilts. Gnarled trunk rises to jagged peaks. I walk the wooded valleys of Jotunheim.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing that. That's actually way more than I expected.
It's funny how the timing works of this interview happening just as I'm finished with the first draft, just as that passage is ready, just as the art's being made, just as I'm about to announce the next book. It's how these things. It's reminding me of the serendipities and the synchronicities that happened with the first book, which kind of started to blow me away. And this is just the moment where I finished the rough draft, and I'm super nervous about it, and like, no one's gonna like this one. This is horrible. What have I done? And we're starting to get in those synchronicities again, where I'm getting signs and things are starting to flow together in a positive way that tells me that this is gonna go as well as the last one, I think.
No, it's really exciting. So is this going to be like a similar length, or a little bit longer, a little bit shorter? What do you feel?
It's a little bit longer. The only thing that made me nervous about the first book was it was short. None of the positive reviews, I've never heard anyone say it was too short. But I was nervous because it was short. But it's poetry, it's hard to take a concise art form,
Well, I think the beauty of poetry is that, you're not necessarily going to sit down and read it from, cover to cover in one sitting. You're going to read one poem and maybe have it sitting on your coffee table, read another poem sometimes. So I think, poetry doesn't necessarily need to be so extravagantly long, but I don't think anyone's going to be upset if all of a sudden they start getting to 100 pages long, 200 pages long.
I think, so, to talk about far future projects, so I finished this one. It's going to be a little longer. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to need to do some work on the prose, but what probably will be the third book is probably just Odin. So I don't know how long that one's going to be. He's got, each of his names could be a poem. Each of the runes could be a poem. Each of the runes could contain all of his names, could contain all of the runes. I might never finish. But that's...
Tell me when to stop.
Yeah. The next one, that's what's going to be. It's going to be, I think the finishing of, because I enjoy the format, I enjoy the narrative storytelling and the process of working my spiritual journey into the poetry, but maybe this will finish off something like a trilogy that I can combine together, where it'll be my oath, my journey where I come to terms with who I am, and finally my time with Odin. And I think it'll be a nice package that I'll.
Oh, yeah.
After that, who knows?
Well, excellent. Well, I think we're well over 45 minutes.
I can talk.
But Jason, thank you so much for coming out here. It's really been a pleasure to actually, you're not too far away. That's kind of the benefit of having a meeting where we can sit in the same room and talk about it, is that we're actually not too far away from one another. But I appreciate you making it out here and actually having this conversation. Obviously I want to give you this time. Where can people find you? Where can people find your book, your Patreon, all those things? This is your time.
Build your platform.
Well, the easiest way to find me is on Instagram is @wandering_Yggdrasil. And the link in my bio is a link tree, which contains pretty much everything you want to find. A link to my book, which is on The Oath on Amazon. The other one will be coming shortly. Also within my link tree is my Patreon. I really am deeply appreciative of the folks that get on there and support me. It makes it a lot easier to keep going down a path when you have folks that you know are rooting for you from that standpoint. And that's amazing. So, you know, you can find that on my Instagram again. And then I also have the easiest way, if you want to get notifications, for example, the next book, I did recently get a mailing list going. So there's a link there in my Instagram bio. And no spam. You won't get anything crazy. If you sign up for that, you'll just get an email when my next book comes out. And that's that.
No, that's awesome. Well, Jason, once again, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining me for Know Your Folk, joining Jason for Know Your Folk. I hope to continue this series and continue to interview content creators and crafters and just anything in this community that is adding to the Norse Pagan culture, community, and now our history. But if you want to stay tuned for more episodes like this, make sure you subscribe to the Wisdom of Odin. If you want to see Jason eventually sing, make sure you subscribe as well, because I will eventually get him there. I'll get a tackle, a harpa, I'll get a lyre, and we'll get something going. So, that's a guarantee right there. So, Jason, you can't say anything else. That's already written in stone. So, until the hall, skål.
Skål.